Welcome to the Birth Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Hoff, BSN RN. I am a wife, a mother of two, and a nurse specializing in the care of women and newborns. In this podcast, we will share powerful journeys of birth givers with the goals of lifting the veil on the birth experience, healing through sharing, and beginning an open conversation to strengthen trust and promote transparency between birthing people and healthcare providers. Hello. Today I have with me Tiffani Fuller, MSN, RNC-OB, C-EFM. That is a lot of letters, Tiffani. Today she is going to share her birth story with us, which was the inspiration for her to become a labor and delivery nurse. We are also going to discuss the experience of women of color as patients in obstetrics and how we as a medical community can become more aware of their experience and take steps to improve. Tiffani, welcome. And thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me, Kelly.
So let's start with your birth experience. I know you have told me this story before, but I want to start with this because it was a big step in you becoming a nurse.
Sure. So I had my first baby when I was 24, 25. And we were newly married. My husband at the time was in the military. And so it was just us down in like Southwest Georgia. And we were going through our pregnancy, all the things. And so I was scheduled for an induction to have my baby. I didn't have a birth plan, not a real one by any of the standards that we have today. Like my birth plan included epidural. Yes. I had no anticipation of anything other than I wanted to have a baby. So of course I had an epidural. So I came in for my induction that night, and it was with a Cervidil, if I'm remembering correctly. And it is a little foggy because I had some pain medication, some Stadol. Any of us who know the meds know that Stadol can mess with your memory just a little bit. But I had some Stadol, which was amazing, requested and given. So thank you. And I had just a normal induction. So that night you come in, you get a Cervidil, we go to sleep. Great. The next day, my actual induction started. And so that morning, they had decided to put me on Pitocin. And at this particular facility, they had a rule that, or this provider facility, I don't know, they had a rule that you couldn't get an epidural until you were at least 4 centimeters. And so I started on Pitocin and everything was great until it wasn't. And so I was just kind of laboring. I was requesting pain medication and they were like, we can't give you anything because you're not 4 centimeters. We can maybe give you some more Stadol. So they gave me some more Stadol, which of course, as we know, the second dose doesn't work as well as the first dose. So I was able to sleep a little bit. And then I was like, I'm in pain. I need an epidural. And so they still were like, no. And so they were like, well, we need to put in this catheter to see how strong your contractions are. So without an epidural, they placed the IUPC. And I vividly remember crab walking backwards up the bed as she was trying to place it. And the nurse was telling me, don't run from me.
Those that don't know what an IUPC is. I am cringing right now. It's an intrauterine pressure catheter. So it's a kind of like a plastic stick that goes through your cervix and it rests in between your baby and your uterus so that it can measure the pressure between your baby and your uterus. So not what I would want to do without an epidural.
Right. And not knowing, right? So we get the IUPC and they're like, okay, well, your contractions aren't really strong enough. We need to increase your Pitocin. And they're like, well, it looks like you can get an epidural now. And so I vividly remember I was in so much pain. I have this IUPC in and the nurse comes in and she's like, okay, so now it's time. It's your turn. You can get your epidural, but you have to sit up. You have to sit up right now and you have to just be ready because, he is busy and you have to get up and get ready. And so then I had a moment where and he had just walked in. So I yelled at her and I was like, if he needs to leave, then he can just leave because I can't get up fast enough. And I'm saying it pretty calmly, but in that moment, it was not that way. It was like yelling. And so the anesthesiologist, he just kind of walked into it and he was like, no, I can wait. Take your time. And so he waited until I got in the right position and he was able to place the epidural. And so then things got better for a little bit as far as pain, right? But I'm still laboring. It's like probably mid to late afternoon. So I'd say anywhere between like 1 and 3 p.m. that all of this is going on. And they keep telling me, well, you're still like 4 centimeters. You're not really dilating. You're still 4 centimeters. At this point, I don't care as much because, hey, I've got an epidural. Game on. So then probably towards the end of the shift, now, mind you, like I have all the things that, as we now know, like as a labor and delivery nurse, we have our women whose blood pressure. They were having a hard time keeping my blood pressure up. I remember getting doses of ephedrine. I had on like oxygen. I had gotten fluid boluses. I was in these positions, but I was okay because I was still like A, a little loopy from my Stadol doses, and B, I had no pain. It was a great epidural, by the way. So if it's something you're into, I advise it, especially if you get a good one. And so then about change of shift, the nurse comes in and checks me one more time. And her words to me were, well, I would flip you, but you haven't made any change. And so they're going to section you. So I'm just not going to move you. And I was like, okay. They had come in a little bit before that and told me, well, you're not really making progress. So we're probably going to do a C-section. And I was like, okay. And so when the nurse came in and said that, I was like, okay, you don't have to move me. Again, this is first baby, not really knowing. And we're like, okay, we're going to have a C-section. It's fine. And it just so happened that there was like a stat section on the floor, so they couldn't like take me right then. And so my night shift nurse comes in and she's like, so I hate to start my shift with a C-section. And I was like, okay. So she was like, I'm going to move you a little bit. And so it was like 7. And so literally she moved me, like not much, because I ended up having my baby vaginally, probably within an hour of her rotating me around a little bit. So let's see, he was delivered by 8:45 or so. So once she got in and started like moving me around and doing the maneuver, so it was roughly about an hour or so from when she took over. And again, new mom, we didn't know. She was just like, okay. I pushed maybe once or twice. I didn't even really push. He was a small baby. So I pushed like once or twice and out he came. Again, new parents. So we were like super excited, not realizing that he was having some respiratory distress. So we're like taking pictures and they're over there resuscitating him. In hindsight, it's funny, right? In
As long as
hindsight,
he's
it's funny.
okay, yes.
He's
And I know
okay.
he is.
He's 17. He's great. But like when I think back on it, I'm like, oh no, I have vivid memories of my husband excitedly taking pictures and he's like, yeah, it's a boy, and they're over there doing all the things. So, because the OB even left me to go over help the nurse to start the resuscitation while they called in other people. So, yeah, that was number 1.
That's crazy.
Mhm. That is crazy.
That's not the turn
That
I
is
was
crazy.
expecting, but okay.
Yeah. That's what happened. That's what happened the first go round. And so it was after that I kind of like started to process and think about everything. And I was like, that could have been done so differently from a patient perspective. And yes, I was young, and yes, I was a mom, and I didn't have any of my family there as support. They were coming, but they weren't there. So it was just me and my husband, 2 young people who were just having their first baby. And, I don't want to say it's assumptions, but assumptions that people can make. And oh yeah, that's what happened. First baby decided that, we can probably do this better. I could probably do this a little bit better.
Are you pregnant and planning a hospital birth? You don't need a birth plan. You need a birth vision. In my opinion, birth plans set you up for failure. Yep, I said it. Hear me out before you turn off this podcast. You may think that by downloading a generic birth plan, it means you're in control. The truth is, it's not that simple. No one can control exactly how their birth will go. There are way too many variables. What every pregnant person wants is to walk into the hospital pregnant and to walk out with a healthy newborn in their arms. The journey in between is the murky part. It's hard to know what issues might come up that need to be addressed. If you focus your energy on a birth vision rather than giving your power to a birth plan, you can empower yourself to make the best choices for you and your baby. That's why you need to get into my Empowered Hospital Birth program. As a labor nurse and mindset coach, I can help guide you through the process of maintaining the calm autonomy that will help you achieve the birth vision you desire. In my Empowered Hospital Birth program, I will help you identify the source of anxiety you have surrounding hospital birth, fill in knowledge gaps to make sure that you are fully informed and confident, learn key phrases so you can better communicate with your medical team, emotionally process your fears so that they don't hold power over you. Go to kellyhoff.com/empowered to book a free 30-minute private birth vision call, where we will identify your top fears and must-haves and gain clarity on exactly how you want to feel in the birth space. That's kellyhoff.com/empowered. I'm honored to be a part of your birth journey. So then what did you take with you to the next delivery to help make that better?
So I had picked out my doctor and I loved her and she was amazing. It just so happened that when I had to go have my baby, she wasn't the doctor that was on. And so I ended up with a physician that was not on, but still I was a labor and delivery nurse. And I knew by then that, we all have like a cloud over us when we go to have our babies. And so I was like, I'm going to be the best patient. I'm like, I'm not going to watch the strip. I'm not going to watch the monitor. I'm not going to be difficult. I'm going to say, yeah, I'm going to be so good so that there's no drama. And for the most part, I was so that day when I came in, I had gone to the doctor's office earlier, saw my doctor. She's like, yeah, it's time to have a baby. This baby is different. She was like 9 pounds on ultrasound. and they were like plus or minus a pound, Tiffany. So she's going to be a significantly larger baby than your last baby, which was like 6 pounds. And I was like, okay. So we go in because we had monitoring in the office and the strip had been non-reactive and we were like 4 days from our due date. And she's like, just go have a baby. And the plan had been to be for an induction, but again, it was a significantly larger baby. And she was like, so you might have a C-section, but we'll try an induction and see what happens. Okay, great. So we go in, we do all the things. And at this point, I am a labor and delivery nurse and I typically work nights. And so this is middle of the day. And they put the baby on the monitor and she is non-reactive. She's just hanging out there. And then she has like one late with a contraction, which I didn't feel. And I was like, oh, okay. And I was like, but I'm a night shift nurse. So she's not really, this isn't her awake time. So, and I hadn't eaten and all the things. And I was like, so this isn't when we're normally awake. And so, of course, true to form, they were like, well, we can start the induction and just kind of watch and see. And I said, okay. By later in the day, she had like a beautifully reactive strip around our awake time. So around 6 or so, she's up. It's like a category 1 strip. It's beautiful. I'm not really having any contractions. And so everything's going well. So at about, I'm going to say 8 or 9 o'clock, because I had not been looking at the monitor. I even asked the nurse to turn it off for me so that I couldn't see it because I was really trying to be good. I was like, can you just turn that off? I don't even need to see it, right? And so the doctor comes in and she's like, your baby is having repetitive lates. And I think we need to go ahead and deliver. And my doctor, the one that I had chosen, she had written all over my chart, like labor and delivery nurse. It wasn't like a secret. And I was like, repetitive lates, like, oh my God, yes, of course. We need to have a baby. Absolutely. And so at the particular hospital I was in, they had to call in their OR team. And so I was like, okay, so they're getting me ready. They're like, well, let's do your epidural and get that done. So you'll have that. And then we can just go to the OR when everybody gets here. And I'm like, yes. So we get that. Another great epidural. It was great. And then something, and I to this day don't know what, told me to just look at the strip. And so the nurse I had, she was a newer nurse, so she was still running her paper, which is fine, and actually pulled the strip and looked at it. And it wasn't what the physician had told me that it was. There had only been the one late that had happened earlier in the day when I was there, and there were no repetitive lates. And so it was like a beautifully reactive MST. And I was like, oh, this is hard. So then I got a little upset because then I felt like she had lied to me, which she had. And so I called her back into the bedside and I was like, can you please show me what you're seeing? Because I don't see it. And then she got upset with me for questioning her. And she was like, well, your baby did have a late. It was here. And I said, yes, but since then there haven't been any others. And so, like, why are we rushing to do a C-section? We're supposed to have an induction. What's going on? She's like, well, you're just 1 centimeter. And I'm like, yes, I get it, but what are we doing? So she then proceeds to sit down at the bedside and write AMA forms out and say, well, if you won't have your C-section right now, you have to sign these AMA forms. And so, like, I'm very upset at this point. And, like, there's crying and, my husband's like, what is going on? And I'm still livid. I'm like, I don't care. Hand me the papers. I'm signing them because this is not right. And I just remember my husband saying, I just want everybody to be okay. And I'm like, everybody is okay. But this woman is not being honest. She's lying. So I signed AMA papers while I'm laying there with an epidural. And I'm like crying and I'm upset. And I called the charge nurse in after that. And I asked her and I said, I want you to be honest with me and make sure I'm not missing something. I said, is my baby in distress from your opinion? And she looked at the strip. And I knew as a nurse, I was putting her in a bad position, but I needed, And she looked at the strip and she says, your baby looks fine right now. We don't need to do anything. And I said, okay, if anything changes, you can come back in here, but she cannot. And so I fired her for that night. She couldn't come back to my room. So the next morning, the physician that my doctor had arranged for to kind of be there, she shows up that morning and she's like, hey, I hear you. There was a rough night. And I kind of explained everything. And she was like, okay. She says, well, you haven't really dilated. And if, I'm open if you want to do a C-section. This is a larger baby. She says, all the risk. You tell me where you're feeling right now. I'm like, we can go have a baby. It's fine. And so we went and we had a C-section for my daughter that morning with that physician. And again, as we go to the C-section part, it went fine, but it's a little murky because I requested a little Versed on the way to the OR. So, and they were like, we normally give it after the baby. And I just distinctly remember saying, she's strong. You can give me a little bit before.
So I'm trying to process this and understand. Did you continue to proceed with the induction after that provider was no longer taking care of you?
Yeah, I still had the Cervidil.
Oh, gotcha. And then did they do any Pitocin?
That night, no, because my cervix was not right.
Not ready.
I needed,
okay.
Yeah. I needed support with that piece.
Okay. So the decision later to have the C-section wasn't because of the strip. It was because you hadn't progressed. It had been many, many hours and there was no progression. There was no clinical reason to start the Pitocin.
Correct. It would have been a longer induction. And so they gave me the option and I was like, it's okay. So let's just go.
It was somewhat elective, but understandable. You wouldn't want to have a doctor that was lying to you be the one that performs your C-section.
Yeah, she didn't do it. So I had the other doctor do it.
Wow. So when I asked you what did you take with you, it ended up being kind of a moot point. Right. Everything you learned from that first delivery was not the same thing that went wrong with the second at all.
Correct.
Did you didn't deliver at the hospital that you worked at?
No, I didn't deliver at the hospital that I worked with, only because my doctors didn't go there, because it would have been totally different had I delivered at the hospital that I worked at. As I was like texting with the nurses that I worked with, and I was like, I just signed AMA papers. And they're like, what is happening?
Drama. Wow. How big was your daughter?
9 pounds, 3 ounces.
So probably a good decision.
Yeah. It wasn't I don't regret it.
Right. And so the physician that originally had wanted you to have a C-section was trying, just so that listeners can understand, was trying to tell you that the strip, which is the baby's heart rate, we look at how the baby's reacting to contractions. And what this provider was saying was the baby's heart rate was going down consistently after every contraction. But when you looked
Correct.
at the strip, you saw that it looked textbook perfect the way that you would have wanted it to,
Correct.
and it only went down one time. And
Uh-huh.
then the risk for babies whose heart rate is going down after the contractions is that they're not
Mm-hmm.
getting enough oxygen. And
Correct.
so that could lead to long-term problems with the brain
Mm-hmm.
because the baby's brain doesn't get oxygen for a period of time and can lead to acidosis and damage and all sorts of things.
Correct.
So that's what the provider was trying to tell you was happening, was that there could
Uh-huh.
be long-term brain damage when in fact the strip was
Mm-hmm.
telling us that the baby's brain was metabolizing perfectly and reacting perfectly and everything looked neurologically intact, which
Correct.
nurses are very capable of looking at the baby's heart rate and understanding that. And you are certified in EFM, which
Mm-hmm.
makes you completely capable of doing that. So when somebody comes in and tells you
Correct.
that, you know they're straight up lying to you.
Right. Well, even at the time I wasn't, but I was still working as a labor and delivery nurse, and that's
Right.
part of my role is to be able to assess the fetal
Yeah,
strip.
without the
So,
certification, you
mhm.
can still tell
Correct.
if the baby is in danger or not. So the first delivery was the one that led you
Hmm.
to become a labor and delivery nurse. So
Correct.
what was the part about that that inspired you to begin to do that? You said that you did a lot of processing.
Right.
Is that what led you to become the labor and delivery nurse?
I just thought it could be better, honestly, like in the
Right.
most simplistic form. I was like, for the next person, I want it to be better. So I want to give them every opportunity if that's what they want. Because
Mm-hmm.
I want to label, but I wasn't like, oh, I have this very elaborate birth plan. My birth
Mm-hmm.
has to go this way. I literally came in with the intent of having a baby. So healthy baby was my
Mm-hmm.
goal. Healthy mom, healthy baby
Mm-hmm.
was my goal. And so I didn't care how we got there. And so even if the first delivery had ended up as a C-section, I wouldn't have cared as long as my baby and I were both okay. And so I feel like if that's always at the forefront, then it doesn't matter. People can come in and tell me they want to do cartwheels while they're having their baby, and I'm going to be like, okay, as long as you don't fall on your tummy in between,
Yeah.
And so that to me is more of the why.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought this could be better, and
Yeah.
I think I can do it better than the way it was done for me.
Because specifically, then was it the hospital policies or was it more the way that the nurse was talking to you? Because
It
I
was
feel
more the way
like
the nurse was talking to me. It wasn't
Mhm.
necessary because I don't know what the actual policies were because, but it was the way that she was talking to me.
Like you have to sit up and you have to do this, and it doesn't matter
Correct. You
what your
have to
comfort
do
level
this.
is, and
Exactly. It
there's
doesn't
no
matter
space
that
to
you're
pause if
uncomfortable.
you're not feeling comfortable. And
Correct. Or if you really wanted me to be ready, then you wouldn't have come in 2 seconds before he did. You would have came in 5 minutes before he did and you would have helped. So it's that kind of thing.
yeah, just remember you're
Hmm.
dealing with a human that's in pain, not necessarily
Right.
somebody that can just follow orders.
Right. It
Yeah.
takes a minute to process.
hmm Totally. And then
Hmm.
a minute to move because you're in pain.
Yeah. Yes, especially. Hmm.
Say, if you could go back and talk to yourself
Hmm.
before any of this happened, before either the first delivery or the second delivery or before both, and you pick
Hmm.
whichever would be the most impactful for you, what would you tell yourself to try to maybe make things go more smoothly or just any knowledge that you wish you had known ahead of time?
Right. Well, it's not what I wish I would have known. I guess it's more like hindsight is 2020.
Right.
And so the parts about not all healthcare providers are like those individuals, like some of the individuals that you meet, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I let like the initial nurse, the way that she kind of spoke to me or whatever, kind of shape my delivery or my future delivery, then I could carry that, and I don't, because then I had an amazing nurse that followed behind her and was like, oh, I don't really want to start my date with a section. Let's see what happens. And we did a couple moves and I pushed the baby out in an hour. So just kind of keeping that in the forefront for me would be the thing. And then for the second delivery, again, you aren't it sometimes feels alone. It can feel isolating and you feel like you're advocating, and but you do have people there that will advocate with and for you. And that was important for the second delivery because I knew it was difficult based on the interactions I saw the physician have with the team for them to stand up. So like I said, when I asked the charge nurse to come in and tell me what did my baby look like, if she was truly in distress. And if she is, she could take me back to the OR right now. I didn't care. and to have to put this person in this position. And so I guess that's what I would take with it, is that that people are there to help you, and that we're all just people.
Right.
Everybody's just people, you know,
Yeah.
and we're just as human as the
Yeah.
next person. So
Like Mr. Rogers says, look for the helpers. Like if you
right,
can't find the person
look for your
you're identifying
right.
with, look for the helpers.
Right. Look for the helpers. And so
Yeah.
that's the piece. It's like you look for the people that could help. And even the nurse that was taking care of me, who was like the newer nurse,
Hmm.
I knew that she wanted to help. I just knew that she didn't know how to help. And
Yeah.
that's why, as a L&D nurse, then I knew I needed to speak to the charge nurse, because I knew that that's supposed to be the most experienced nurse on the floor
Hmm.
in that moment, you
Yeah.
know? And so it's that.
I just want to validate that experience for you, because how awful that you had to go to that level to advocate for yourself. And think about, I want to, I'm glad that you were a labor and delivery nurse at that time,
Hmm.
because you probably would not have known how to do that.
Yeah, I wouldn't have.
So then people that are in that position, that's why it's
Hmm.
important that we're talking about this, because people that are in a position where they feel like they aren't being heard and they don't
Hmm.
know where to go to advocate and they don't understand the structure of the hospital. And there's also in that moment the new nurse that was trying to take the best care of you and that didn't know how to move forward, that you were
Hmm.
able to talk to the charge nurse and know that that was the person you talked to. And just, a message that I want to put out there is that the charge nurse is someone you can talk to. And so when you're looking for people that could help you, that is an option. And
Right.
you, like you said, your goal wasn't to not necessarily have a C-section. The goal was to keep you and your baby safe. And
Correct.
rushing to a C-section when it's not necessary isn't necessarily the way we're going to keep anybody safe, because there are risks and benefits to a C-section, right?
Absolutely.
Do the benefits outweigh the risks? And in that moment when your baby is perfectly healthy and we don't know if you are going to progress because you haven't
Hmm.
had the time to allow your body to prove itself, then the benefits don't outweigh the risks. But later on, when it's been enough time and your body still hasn't done what we wanted it to, then we could
Hmm.
say, yes, now the benefits outweigh the risks.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I guess what I'm trying to say is, you have a right to talk to other people. You have a right to ask questions and have people try to walk through things with you. I think
Mhm.
I see a lot of patients coming in feeling defensive because there is this patriarchal culture to obstetrics. I say that a lot and I kind of want to change the wording, but just
Mhm.
this is a history that we have. And women come in with this defensiveness because they feel like they're going to be told to do something they don't want to do. And while that's always a possibility, there's always the room for a conversation. So if we start off with the whole idea that we're both, like you had said, if this is what I need to be safe and for my baby to be safe, let's do it. If we all have that attitude,
Mhm.
most of the time we can come to an understanding. With that provider in particular, I agree, probably that wasn't going to happen because it seems like there
Mhm.
was an agenda there. Um,
Right.
but as long as we're all on the same page there, we can probably
Mhm.
work through just about anything.
Absolutely. And I do agree with you that patients have come in more. So they've come in more with this more defensive attitude between like healthcare and their right to birth, however they want to birth. And honestly, as an L&D nurse, it saddens me, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
that's the whole reason that we're there, is to advocate for you. And two, so I've been in situations where I've told patients, I was like, my sole job is to educate you and advocate. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
After that, you get to make all the choices. Like, and your baby is actually the quarterback. You're not really making choices. I'm not really making choices. Your baby is actually deciding the options that we are giving you.
Mm-hmm.
It's nothing that I'm doing. And so a lot of times when patients do come in with this defensive attitude, I've like sat there and I'm like, so I'm okay. We go through like birth plans and we talk about all this stuff. And it's like, so let's talk about where we are. Like, how this relates to you and what you're going to have and what's happening with you and your baby. And not, again, to dissuade you or to tell you you can't have it, but it's to base what's actually happening with your labor, your birth versus this idea that people come in with, right? I want to match your expectations with the reality of what's happening. And sometimes we can do that by talking about it. And sometimes people are very tied to the idea. And there have been moments where, as a nurse, I've had to sit down and tell people, like, my sole goal is that is healthy mom, healthy baby. That's it. Like, and sometimes when you say that, people, it kind of helps everybody like have that moment of, are you saying that that's an option that might not be something that we can achieve? And sometimes the answer is yes, that is, at this point, we might not have that as an option on the table anymore because of something that's happening or occurring. If it isn't, then I want to talk about it and I want you to be fully informed and know so you can make good choices. And if it is something, then of course, I mean, again, cartwheels. If you want to have babies and cartwheel across the room, as long as you don't fall and have to write like an incident or something, you can do it. So it really is. It saddens, I think, as healthcare, not just nurses, but as healthcare providers, we've gone into this to help, and and unfortunately, there's this disconnect that is happening now, rightfully so, maybe, because there have been some things happening in maternal health care that have raised alarms, raised flags, pinpointing issues that we know exist and spotlighting them. And then like, okay, well, let's come to the table and figure out how we can make it better for everybody. So
Yeah.
I agree.
Well, and I think also, and I want to go back to those issues that have been spotlighted, but just to not solely blame everything on the patriarchal culture of obstetrics,
No.
because that's not fair. There's also a
Yeah.
competition. There's a motherhood competition. There's this mom
Right.
shaming that's going on. And then there's
Which is crazy,
attitude
right?
of the premier birth. And if you can't do it the way that our ancestors did it and the way that we're meant to do it, then you've somehow failed. What we forget is that if you ask your mothers and grandmothers how things happened, ask how many of those women on the sidelines of their family survived their birth and how many babies survived the birth.
Correct.
Then we start having a more clear idea of why we do some of the things that we do.
Right. And I think more expectations. I think it helps with the clarity of why we do the things we do. And so
that's not to say that it's not, that our bodies are not meant to birth humans without any interventions. They're meant to.
Well, some of us aren't, though. It's okay to be. And if you're one of the people that aren't, it's absolutely okay.
Mm-hmm. Or
And
maybe you could have, but the ramifications would have been so
detrimental.
severe that it takes away that quality of life. Like if you have to wear diapers for the rest of your life, maybe that's not the best outcome that we should hope for. We can mitigate that. We can move towards something that would.
Or if you lose your life.
You could also lose your life. Yeah.
Yeah, if you lose your life. And if that happens, yeah, that's an issue.
We're going to step in whenever we see those risks and having those. I mean, even if someone's having a home birth, if you have a backup plan, if you have the steps in place, if you have the A to Z, this is what we're going to do in every single potential emergency.
Not just having the plan, it's being able to act. It's
exactly.
The issue is not the plan, because we can all plan for the most part. Like that's when we plan at our best, when we're having a baby. It's once you recognize that we are no longer on the same yellow brick road that we started on, and we need to go ahead and actually institute those plans. I think that's where the deviation comes. I think that's where, as healthcare providers, that's where we can really step up and do an even better job of educating our patients about when we're starting to deviate. And it's okay to tell patients, hey, we're starting to deviate a little bit. It's okay to tell patients your baby is showing signs that they are getting tired in labor. And we're going to do all these things to kind of help your baby get through these next parts. It's nothing that you've done. It's potentially just a placenta issue or position issue or whatever. But these are the things that I'm seeing. And it's okay to keep your patients informed. I think a lot of times patients feel that they don't have that. They don't recognize that it's happening until we all rush into the room and all dressed alike. As I would tell my patient, if something's going on, you'll know, because like 10 of us will run in here and we are all dressed alike. And so, and patients would laugh just like that, right? Initially when you tell them, and then when all of a sudden we all show up, they're like, what's going on? And so I think a lot of it is expectation management. It really is. And I think definitely there's opportunities on both sides, patient and healthcare providers, that we could do a better job managing our expectations.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. It's all about communication as well. It's the only way we can do that. And hiding things from each other isn't the way to do it.
No. No.
And lying.
No lying. Don't lie. Nope.
So you and I have noticed, and as a healthcare community, there has been, like you said, events that have raised alarms. I can think of a few specifics, but some events that have raised alarms that have told us that, and this is probably across the board in healthcare, but we're specifically talking about obstetrics, that people of color are often, the word marginalized keeps coming up, but it's more specific than that. Symptoms are glossed over. Assumptions are made just right off the top of my head that, for instance, people of color historically have higher blood pressure according to statistics. The reasons behind that we don't know, but in certain circumstances, when someone comes in with a high-ish blood pressure, it is more common for people of color to be brushed aside and say, oh, well, this is probably a chronic hypertension that we didn't pick up on. It's probably not that big of a deal. We don't need to do anything about it. Or if in labor, just thinking of some other specific circumstances, maybe we're having some symptoms like increased bleeding, and we're being told that the bleeding is normal, and we're becoming concerned, but we're brushed aside because whatever reason. I'm not even sure what the thinking is there. There is more of a tendency for providers to not listen as intently to those concerns. I feel like we need to do some work as medical providers to get on the same page and understand where that we have these biases, wherever they come from. Thinking that people of color have high blood pressure in general is a bias. Thinking that this patient that is concerned about her bleeding is overreacting is a bias. And we need to get on the same page and understand where those biases come from.
I agree.
I feel like I can only see it from my perspective as a white woman that's in labor and delivery. I can see where I've seen that happen, but I haven't had that personal experience. So I wonder if you have any insight that you might want to provide that might help enlighten me or other providers and other women that are coming into the healthcare community on the work that we could do maybe to step towards meeting each other in that gap and connecting those dots.
I think
if that makes any sense.
It does. And I think the first step is like recognition. So we have to recognize that we all have implicit bias. Like if you can just recognize that, you know what, about this particular thing, I am biased. It doesn't make me a bad person. It doesn't make me like a racist, or it doesn't make me, because a lot of times we associate all these other negative connotations with implicit bias, right? It just is what it is. It is something that you innately believe, feel based on how you grew up, your environment, what you've been around, what you've been exposed to. So acknowledging that as healthcare providers, I think is the first part. The second piece would be then to educate ourselves so that when the implicit bias raises its head, we can counter it with actual education that we've obtained that says, you know what, maybe I do think that women of color have historically higher blood pressure, but I've actually learned recently or whatever from research, from reading studies that maybe it doesn't happen as much as possible. And high blood pressure is high blood pressure, right? Stroke range is stroke range. It doesn't matter what color you are. And this needs to be addressed. And I think those two things, so, recognition, education, and then actually just conversations, like actually talking about it and not feeling attacked as healthcare providers when these things come up. Like really being able to humble yourself in the moment. And that's hard because there's not a lot of allowance for us to be people in these moments, right? And to be like, you know what, maybe I did miss that blood pressure, or I didn't recognize that symptom, or, yes, my patient that has come in 27 times with everything but this, I did have that implicit bias about her and was dismissive about her symptoms this time. Or, there's not a lot of space for that in healthcare or in society in general. And so I think as healthcare providers, we have to make that space for each other. No one quite understands it the way that we do. It's nothing like seeing 20 patients that day who all come in with high blood pressure and triaging them all and going and running the tests all and being able to create space for each other to have these conversations and to be like, I've seen her three times, because none of us want to miss it. And I think that has started to become kind of like this undercurrent to some of these conversations is that we just don't care as healthcare providers. Like we really just don't care. I have yet to meet anyone in healthcare who truly is like, oh, I want this patient to go home and have a stroke or to bleed out or to lose their baby, their wife, their mother, their sister, their daughter. I've yet to meet anyone in healthcare that's like, that's what I want for that's what I want for my patients. And so recognizing that piece and then being able to create that space and then being supportive of each other and doing the things that we're supposed to do as we are checks and balances, right? Like that's what healthcare is, checks and balances. And so, it's definitely collaboration, but it's always checks and balances. Like, so maybe I'll catch something that the physician doesn't, or the physician will catch something that I overlooked in my assessment. And they'll be like, hey, what about this? Or just sometimes knowing that something's not right and being comfortable enough with your team to be like, I don't know what is wrong with this patient, but I know something is wrong and I need everybody to come look at her until we can figure it out. Being able to create that space is amazing. And so I think those are the ways that we address it without the shame and the blame. If we need to create space for us as healthcare providers so that we can have these conversations and we can address these things. And it's, again, not with shame, not with any kind of blame. It's literally like, how are we going to put the patients first and what that looks like? And everybody leaves their ego at the door. And I think we're getting somewhat better about that, if you want me to be honest. I think that's what the spotlight and the highlight has done, is allowed everyone to leave egos at the door. Or if someone hasn't left their ego at the door, for us to then be like, hey, you probably need to drop your ego off at the door because we need to take care of the patient. So I think that's really important. And egos are not just like the providers. It's nurses, doctors, everyone who cares for the patient.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, that it has gotten better. I think that also as nurses, I didn't realize I had actual power when it came to that. I know that when I worked with you were really good at helping me laugh at uncomfortable situations or when I felt stupid.
Yeah.
You helped me turn it around and laugh at it. And you were very good at pointing out when I did things right. And then we would sit down and kind of have a huddle on the things that I didn't feel so good about. I'm not going to say wrong because nobody's trying to do things wrong.
Right. Nope. There's opportunities.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody can do things better. So I think that also as nurses, we don't realize that we have the opportunity to make providers that we work with, because we don't work for them, we work with them, feel also comfortable in that space, make them understand that we're a team and that we also have their back.
Mm-hmm.
I've had a lot of breakthroughs with providers that were called difficult. Whether that's fair or not, I don't think it's fair. I think what they are is feeling very responsible for everybody. They're feeling responsible for the life of the patient, and they're feeling responsible for their license. They're feeling responsible for the license of everybody in the room. They're feeling responsible for leading everything that's happening, and the buck stops with them.
Absolutely.
And so there have been times when we've had very intense experiences where I've just gone to the provider and I've been like, that was great.
Mm-hmm.
You did great. Everything's fine. We're all fine. We're a team. I've got your back. And they've been shocked to hear somebody say that, because I don't think providers ever realize that we have their back.
Absolutely.
That they feel like they have to have everyone else's back. And I have seen people visibly relax when I've said,
Mm-hmm.
I got you, because we have to have each other's back.
Absolutely.
The life of two patients is at stake when we are doing a lot of these very high intense emergencies, and we have to have each other's back.
Yes.
And that being said, also, the patients need to know that the providers and the nurses have their back as well.
Right.
So you talked about the people are frequent flyers, right? I feel like that's where we kind of go awry mostly. Although some of the incidents I'm referring to, and like where they were very highly publicized,
Mm-hmm.
women have died in childbirth or after childbirth because of negligence or
alleged negligence.
I know that the frequent flyer situation, I guess I'm going to land on that, is difficult for everyone because there's a need that's not being met.
Correct.
Whether we can meet it or not.
Yes.
And it can be very distracting because, like you said, when something actually happens, it can be ignored. And then,
Life shattering for everyone. I mean,
yeah,
so that's why it's so important that even with those patients that we still dial back in. I'm sure you and I both could like think and think of, oh, we've had some frequent flyers that we've come across in our lives. And then all of a sudden, this is the time that it's real.
right.
It's not any of the other things.
Mm-hmm.
And if for whatever reason we weren't acutely paying attention, even though someone's a frequent flyer, they still get the workup. They still get this. They still get all the things. And when we worked together, I think that was something that was so, as I've worked different places and seen different things. I think that's something that makes the place so unique is that even when we had those types of patients, everyone was given that level of treatment, that level of like, you know what? I know I've seen Miss ABCD to 6 times this week, and this is day 7. And still on day 7, she's still going to get like, okay, let's run through it again. Let's just make sure we haven't missed anything. And it's not just the nurses, it's the providers too, because it mattered that much. And I think that also led to us having
Yeah.
some really great outcomes where I think under other circumstances they wouldn't have been. In other places they might not have been. And I think it's that attitude
Yeah.
of how we treat all of our patients, you know. And so the places where these things, these spotlights have happened, right? It's not just one place, it's not isolated, it's happening nationwide. And I think it's just really like a call for us as healthcare providers to start having the conversations, to really dial in and have those conversations with each other, but also with our patients. And
Mm-hmm.
it's okay to be honest. I think I don't want to say that we've gotten away from it, but I think we had gotten to a point in healthcare, the patients expected to be like sugar coated a little bit, and then the providers we offered some sugar coating. Like there was this mismatch with expectations, and I think that's
Yeah.
where we really started getting into trouble.
Yeah.
It's okay to say, hey, Tiffani, if you were to have a baby at, whatever age you are, because I'm not sharing,
Mm-hmm.
that you would be at a higher risk because of your age and because of this or because of this. And yes, maybe you do need to lose a few pounds and it's okay. But we had kind of gotten away from that as healthcare
Mm-hmm.
providers because then we get judged, we get scored on people's perception, right? Like, so if
Mm-hmm.
I said that to you, Kelly, and you were like, I'm so offended that Tiffani told me I needed to lose weight to make sure that my pregnancy was as healthy as possible. So we all started kind of doing this dance,
Yeah.
but we're not dancing to the same music. Everybody's got different music and we're all on the dance floor, but we are not dancing together.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's where it's hurt us from patients and from healthcare. Is we're doing this
Mm-hmm.
dance and we really need to be able to say, so Miss Jones, this is where we are. These are the things that are going to ensure that you have the best possible outcome with your pregnancy. While we can't dictate everything, nobody knows everything. Historically speaking, statistically speaking, these are the things that will ensure that you have the best outcome with your pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
Here, let me help you. Let me give you this education, this information, this knowledge. And to do it in such a way that people can be receptive. People have their own stuff with them, so I can't guarantee that Miss Jones or whoever is going to be receptive to me telling her, hey, you probably need to do this, 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 and this, and things will get better. But we still need to do it. And I think that's where
Mm-hmm.
we've kind of lost sight in healthcare, like
Mm-hmm.
as providers and patients, that yes, your doctor should 100% tell you that your blood pressure is high and then you need to change your diet and you might need to lose some weight and you need to drink your water and you need to manage your diabetes and you do need to take your medicine. 100% acceptable that your
Mm-hmm.
healthcare provider says this to you. Now, they shouldn't call you names. They shouldn't be
Right.
rude or disrespect, none of that stuff. And I haven't encountered anyone who's done that, but they should 100% be okay to tell you that and you not walk away saying like, oh, they shamed me in some way.
Mm-hmm. But also give people the tools to help themselves. Like,
Absolutely.
you need to change your diet. Here's how. Here's something
Right.
that might help you. Here's a dietitian, or here's a packet of information.
Nutritionists,
Right.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So it's education and tools, and because
Mm-hmm.
resources aren't the same everywhere, and we all know that.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
you accept that going in, but you also have to accept some accountability and responsibility as well.
Mm-hmm.
As a patient, you have to have some accountability and responsibility. And I know that's an unpopular thing right now
Right.
across the board. Like nobody
Yeah.
wants, like everybody wants accountability without recognizing that we all inherently have some responsibility in order to be accountable as well.
And if it's not working, you can ask. You can say, look, I'm struggling with these carb counts. I'm struggling with taking my medication. Any advice would be helpful.
I can't even count points for Weight Watchers, so I doubt if I was a diabetic, I could count.
I'm so glad
it's
I never
hard.
had gestational diabetes.
Oh my God. Well, they thought I did with my daughter, and I kept dancing. I kept passing the test. They would spot check me, and I would pass, and I'd be like, ha, didn't catch me. Didn't catch me. So yeah.
But keep eating my Cinnamon Toast Crunch every day.
I did. I was eating like a blueberry muffin for breakfast and stopping at Waffle House. Anyway, that was my lack of responsibility, right?
Right. No one's perfect.
Right. That was, you know what I'm saying? No one's perfect, but that was my lack of responsibility.
Reach out if you need help.
Yeah. Absolutely. My doctor was like, so what are you doing? And I was like, meeting. And she was like, I don't want you to eat this way anymore. And I said, thank you. And then I proceeded to do it. So, you know, and I didn't blame her for my 9-pound baby. I knew it was my stops at Waffle House and my blueberry, you know. So I think it's the accountability and responsibility that we all inherently have.
Right. You hear from 2 labor and delivery nurses that we were not perfect.
Compliance was an issue.
Right. We understand compliance is an issue with patients because we have the same issue.
Correct.
So just reach out.
Do your best.
Help me do what I need to do. Help me help you.
Do your best. Keep doing your best. Keep trying.
Yeah. Well, Tiffani, was there anything else that you wanted to talk about?
No.
No, you good?
I'm good.
Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Very
talking with me.
Welcome. I'm so excited for you. So thank you so much, Kelly, for having this space for people to discuss these issues and really kind of come at it from a solution focus. And so I think it's going to be helpful to move the conversation along. So
I hope so.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're so welcome.
Do you have questions that you wish a labor nurse could answer? As your due date approaches, do you wish you could pick someone's brain about all the things that might happen during your labor? When you meet with your OB or midwife, do you forget your questions in the moment? Do you feel like you need someone to take more time to walk you through what might happen in the hospital and how to truly mentally prepare? You're in luck because I'm offering this as a free service in 2023. To get details on how to schedule a free session with me, email me at birthjourneysrn@gmail.com. Thank you so much for tuning into my podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on future episodes. Don't forget to share the podcast with a friend who can benefit from the valuable insights that we share here. And if you could take a moment to leave a 5-star rating and review, it would mean the world to me. If you're ready to work one-on-one with me to embark on a transformational journey towards a confident and empowered hospital birth experience, go to kellyhoff.com/empowered and enroll in my Empowered Hospital Birth Coaching Program. Together, we'll create a roadmap to a birth experience that you'll cherish forever. That's kellyhoff.com/empowered. Let's make your birth experience extraordinary.